The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, everyone. Welcome to our first ICTM webinar of the school year. We had a couple last year and they were very successful, and we're very excited to be able to bring that to you again. We want to thank our ICTM members who make these webinars possible through their membership. I'm Annie Forrest, and I'm an ICTM board member, and I moderate our webinars. Just to remind you how it works for using this platform. In a little bit, our presenter will be giving her presentation. If you have questions during the webinar, you can ask them in the chat. No other participants will see your questions. They come directly to me, and I can kind of curate the questions and ask them either at appropriate times during the webinar, or we'll save them for the end as well and have a little question and answer time. So feel free to shoot your questions to me, and I will make sure we find a spot to ask them. So I'm going to go ahead now and introduce our speaker. So we're very excited about this topic, mathematics of empathy. We have Jerica Jerado, is a 6th grade math teacher at George Washington Middle School in Lyons, Illinois. This is her 4th year teaching as a certified math educator. And before this role, Jerica taught for 3 years at Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy, a social justice alternative high school. It was there that she co-created and designed a curriculum called Mathematics of Empathy with students that gave them a space to process their experiences. Jerica's commitment to social justice stems from her own life experiences rooted in struggle, decolonization, and hope. She identifies as a prison abolitionist and a lifelong learner who has dedicated the last 9 years to creating spaces that are safe for marginalized youth to speak their truths and reclaim their power. So now I'm going to go ahead and turn the screen over to Jerica and let her start. Maybe. George, I might need you to share the screen. I can't get mine to work here.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
All right. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes? Okay, can you see this on the side as well, this go-to webinar control panel?
No, we cannot see.
That's just me? Mm-hmm. Okay, just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if that was everyone. All right, thank you for the introduction, Annie, and thank you so much for extending the opportunity to me to give this presentation on the mathematics of empathy, and to everyone who is attending. All right, so I would like to get started by first posing the question, what is mathematics? Now, the definition that I'm going to use is a definition that was given to me by a student at Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy when we would open the class unpacking what mathematics was. So the definition that I use when I'm talking about mathematics for the first time with my students is that it is the study of anything which changes. And that gives us a platform to incorporate various topics within the math classroom. Examples of things that students have given of things that change are human beings, plants, animals, the solar system, and the weather. Along the side, you can also see a basket on the top right, and then some patterns on a wallet. That I use as a reference to our indigenous ancestors who were mathematicians long before many of the books that we use today were written, and really before mathematics was looked at in the formalized way that we see in the school system now. And so I also open up the field on the first day to bring to light that mathematics is varied, and that mathematics isn't just something that you learn through equations, but it can also be something that is created. So certain people might practice calculus and might know the patterns of derivatives, and they can show this by creating those patterns with their hands. while other people are experts in solving equations and actually calculating out those derivatives. And that's how I begin to introduce the topic of mathematics to students. And the purpose of it is to engage students with the idea that math is all around us in ways that we are aware of and other ways that we are not aware of. So in this conference, I would like to focus in on 3 questions, 3 asks. Why do we have to reimagine mathematics? What does humanizing mathematics mean? And how do we build a mathematics of empathy? So here you can see, when I zoomed out and you saw the whole Prezi, you see mathematics plus empathy is equal to a mathematics of empathy. And below you see a quote from a poem by Luis Valdez. It says, "Tú eres mi otro yo," and in English that's translated to "You are my other me." This is a foundational poem that I use within my classroom. Some of you might know it from the film Precious Knowledge, and others of you might be exposed to it through Luis Valdez's work. There are key principles in this poem of respect and love, and really seeing that a community can only thrive if I am doing the best that I can. And we as a community are each being responsible for our own actions, recognizing that if we harm someone else, you're also causing harm to yourself. And so this is the foundation of how I begin to set the stage for empathy as we unpacked mathematics and looked at how that varies. We also begin to unpack empathy and look at how this poem helps us center ourselves and looking in the world as a mirror. So within my classroom, students are called critical mathematicians. And I use these symbols, the infinity sign, the delta sign, and the omega sign, to represent that we forever change. And because of that, we must always resist. Those of us who have been marginalized know very well that the system works against us in a way to try and assimilate us into society and erase our experiences. And so much of my experience has been working in marginalized communities where this is already a known among my students. They are aware of this. And so them reclaiming their power stems from them being aware that everything around them will always change forever. And this is the way in which they will resist the system, is to continue to change in ways that fuel growth, in ways that feel empathy, that feel community, respect, honesty, these values that we don't usually hear mathematicians have, but that in my class I make it a point that this is what it means to be a critical mathematician, to question the world around you and to read and analyze it. And so when I talk about a mathematics of empathy with my students, I explain to them that it's a fusion. So mathematics of empathy is a fusion between math, sociology, and empathy. And they have to fuse and meet to work together in order to analyze and critically question and reflect on the conditions of our present world. A mathematics of empathy seeks to arm an individual with sustainable and relevant skills to defend their lives and the lives of their communities locally and globally. And it is through this lens that I've created this curriculum with my students to stimulate their curiosity and their drive to make a difference and to change not only their lives, but the lives of their communities, and then see how that also has a global impact and can begin to change some of the norms that as a society we practice. And so I want to dive into the first question that I posed. Why do we have to reimagine math? It's a question that I get asked very often. A lot of the times the reactions that I get when I start talking about a mathematics of empathy is, how do you have enough time to integrate the concept of empathy with math and how does it fit into everything. And so one of the foundational pieces of why I began to integrate empathy into the mathematics curriculum is I started noticing this math anxiety among students. And it's a cultural norm in our society. So you can see within this box right here, this is from a presentation from the University of Sheffield in English that I took a slide from. So they explored how math anxiety actually takes over the working memory when a student is feeling that emotion, or when a person, really when anyone has anxiety. The worrying part overrides anything or everything in the brain, and the person becomes consumed with worrying about math versus actually doing it. And so it paralyzes them, and it makes math seem like it is this really threatening situation, or like they are in grave danger. Like they see a math problem and in their mind they think, right, I'm being chased by a tiger, or something extreme that the brain automatically goes to. And so through that lens, and seeing how students show that by perhaps not writing anything on their paper, misbehaving during class, having outbursts of anger, you know, showing defiance purposefully, or not working within their group, skipping class, you know, coming late to class often, always going to the bathroom. We see this manifest in a lot of different ways. And I have found that through framing mathematics through a lens of empathy and framing it like this is a way in which our community is going to take back our indigenous knowledge of mathematics, and the way that we are going to create a safe space for us in this classroom community where it's okay for each other to fail, where it's okay for you to share your experiences with math, whether that's a great experience, a bad experience, and experience rooted in trauma. So students who experience math anxiety, I have found in my experience through speaking with them, have usually experienced a trauma. I know I can speak from personal experience that when I was in elementary school, I had a third grade teacher that was really nasty to me and said some really terrible things. And it deterred me from wanting to have anything to do with math for a long time. And I found that when I started creating that space for students to share, in the sense of opening it up in, for example, a circle where we share stories, a storytelling circle, students also started sharing experiences that at some point in their educational experience, they had also experienced a trauma or some form of embarrassment that led them to have a negative relationship with math. And many of these students haven't let this information out. Like they haven't shared that experience with others, and they might have been taught that it's not okay to do that, and it's not okay to say that, because it's more okay to avoid math in society than it is to say that I'm struggling with math and maybe I'm 21 years old and I don't know my fours times tables. And I don't want to say that out loud because, right, I'm scared that you're going to judge me. And having those conversations where students can say those things for the first time makes a huge difference in the culture. And so this is something that I'm also doing in the first week to start creating that space where it's okay to fail. And then here you can see the cyclical cycles of math avoidance. So it begins with the negative math experience, which leads to avoidance and procrastination, then leads to being poorly prepared, and leads to having poor math performance. And then it becomes this conditioned behavior that is internalized, that students begin to think, you know, I'm not good at math, or I am dumb. It could even go as deep for them to think that they should just drop out of school because school isn't for them, because of that deep trauma that students have experienced in math classrooms. And I have found that letting students share that trauma and giving space to that does make so much of a difference in the classroom in the long run. Like, students take those stories with them, they bring them up, they show love for each other in ways that affirms that when Jerica says that we're going to be in community, like, this is what that looks like. And it's not just Jerica using the word community because that's a popular word that we're using in education, or that's, you know, something that we might be obligated to use within the school, right? But it's actually showing them examples of what does community look like, how does it feel like, how does it sound like, you know, and how can we practice being in community. So the cycle can be reversed, and, or rather it can be broken. So I have found that through creating culturally relevant mathematics that engages in students' experiences, that allows students to share their stories with math before engaging with the actual mathematical concepts, it begins to create a platform where you're already challenging the negative experiences by creating a positive one within a math classroom. Even if the mathematical concept isn't the first thing that they're going to get exposed to, that will take time to develop, right? As you see here, it might take a few positive math experiences, right? But if you get something the students really interested in, they will engage with the math, and that will make them be prepared for the math. And that could look like in the forms of, right, doing homework, participating in groups, even staying after school for tutoring, joining math clubs, things like that. And it'll lead to overall math improvement. And so the first piece is always creating that awareness. That's foundational. Students most of the time have been told that they just have to keep it moving. And it's not just students, it's also a cultural norm in our society that says, you know, keep it moving, suck it up, doesn't matter what happens, just keep pushing through, it's a part of life. And so creating that moment to pause, create that awareness, and then begin to build that relationship with the student where you can offer that one-on-one support, and then having them share that story of their struggle will move mountains throughout the year. You will see your behavior problems go way, way down. Okay, so the next question that I want to focus in on is, what does it mean to humanize mathematics? On the top, you can see a banner. I'm not sure how big it looks on your screen, but the banner says, how do our relationships affect our ability to transform spaces and reclaim power? This was a banner that was made by a student my first year teaching at Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy. And it's something that I've carried with me throughout all my years in teaching. And it's a question that I ask myself constantly, because everything stems from having that relationship with each student. And it's hard because we have so many of them and there's a limited number of time. So I know that I need constant reminders to be like, how did you build a relationship today? Or how did you critically question what happened around you today in your daily teaching routine? So some examples of ways that I have critically questioned the curriculum is asking the question, is this problem inclusive to the students in your room? You know, is this problem relevant to the students in your room? Does this problem dehumanize another culture? And something that I found very commonly in math textbooks is oftentimes other people's cultures are trivialized. They're seen as something that is a commodity or something that can be engaged with for the purpose of an activity, but not necessarily learning and being aware and being mindful that this is someone else's way of living, and we have to respect that. So this is an example from the 6th grade curriculum that I'm teaching right now, we started with a unit about data analysis. And on the left here, you can see just a scanned copy of one of the pages that touched on dot plots, frequency tables, looked at maximums, minimums, mean, range, those types of concepts. And the book thought that it was appropriate to do this through using Korean pen pal names. So they gave this miscellaneous situation. Your class was paired with another class from essentially 3 Asian countries. They were Korean, Japanese, and Chinese. And so the moment that I saw this, it was really concerning to me. Immediately I thought, this is going to put the students who identify as Asian in a really uncomfortable position, because it's immediately going to turn the eyes of their peers in the room to them. And they're going to go, how do we pronounce this name? How do we say this? And someone might be from Thailand and they're looking at them and how to pronounce a Korean name, because that awareness hasn't been built in yet at the at the 6th grade level. I know that these are conversations that are still unraveling, or conversations that for the first time I'm finding I'm having with some of my students. And so that's something that I didn't want to do, is put anyone in an uncomfortable position right off the bat. I felt like it also pinned someone's culture, right, like I said before, as an object of entertainment or as a problem. I know that in Asian culture, and really in a lot of non-Western cultures, names have a very close and unique significance to the individual, stemming from the family, the values that the family has. And it really promotes this colonized lens when we look at names through this Western idea that we can count the number of letters, and somehow that's something arbitrary that we can do with whatever name that we pick. And so I felt really uncomfortable teaching that, and it's not what I did. And I explained to my students, I had that conversation with them, that, this makes me uncomfortable for these reasons. And the students thanked me. I had a lot of students come up after class and thank me and say, I really appreciate that you didn't do this, and I feel more comfortable in your classroom because of it. So in my experience, no one wants to feel like their culture is an object of entertainment, right? So this was a way in which right off the bat, I'm just teaching mindfulness, that the book is there. We're going to use it sometimes. If it doesn't work, I'm going to do something different, because it's not just we're going to keep it moving with this and begin socializing them and teaching these conditioned behaviors at the 6th grade level, that somehow it's okay to just keep it moving. And so instead of analyzing those names, we ended up doing a project in 6th grade where it's something that I have done before at Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy, just on a different level. So it's the 6th graders, they had more exposure to Google Forms and they had Chromebooks in their classroom. So I surveyed them on social justice issues that I was familiar with. There were about 30 on a list, and I made sure that everything that was on there was something that I could speak to, that I had experience in, or that I knew someone who could come in and give their experiences on that issue. So that was the first piece of just giving them issues to pick from, and all of the students were interested in it. That was like an immediate hook. We're going to talk about what's going on in the real world. I want to do math. That was the immediate reaction from them. And the project looked at different issues. For example, animal rights or food and hunger issues, domestic violence, gun violence in Chicago, nuclear weapons and nuclear wars. And those are some of the topics that students took. They analyzed a few articles that included graphs, and then they developed a statement that they asked to the class on a survey through Google Forms. And the entire class took this survey, and the survey posed a statement that students had to make an opinion on. from a 1 to 10 scale. So the 1 to 10 scale represents a opinion, 1 being strongly disagree and 10 being strongly agree. And so students had a range of a stance or an opinion to pick. And then we also added a section where students had to explain why they made this decision. So also going a level deeper and fostering that environment to create the critical analysis and the reflective analysis, because you might find that someone might have clicked the wrong bubble and their statement might reveal, oh, this student might have been over here. And that also allowed us to touch on margin of error a little bit. And this was a much more humanizing way that I found to integrate the concepts of dot plots, of data analysis, of frequency tables. That also gave me some insight on who my students are, what they stand for at this time in their lives, and what are the things that they have questions about that they want to learn. And really, I wanted to push out this project in the beginning because I want to hook them with their curiosity. I want them to be curious. I want to foster that curiosity in the classroom and make it a part of the culture that we do have levels of analysis to mathematics, and you can always get deeper and deeper and deeper within a concept. And to me, that was way more meaningful and important and significant in their lives than essentially culturally appropriating another culture's names and tallying up how many letter A's they had and then making a dot plot from that. I'm going to go back for just a second. So I just want to add that another thing I found from doing this project is that I had a young girl come to me, or a young student of mine come to me, who ended up opening up an experience that she had gone through earlier in that day. And she really hadn't felt safe to talk to anyone else about it. And I found that this project was also a way of me saying, hey, this is a safe place for us to talk about issues that maybe other people might not feel comfortable talking about. You can talk to me. And so this young person came to me sharing that someone had called her a terrorist earlier in that day, and it was another student, and it broke her completely. She was in tears in my classroom for a whole class period. And in a lot of ways, it was really hurtful and painful to watch, but in other ways, it also gave me hope, and I felt grateful that that student felt that level of comfort from an experience that we had had in the math classroom, that she was able to come to me and to say, hey, we're talking about empathy, you know, like this person isn't showing empathy. This person doesn't know what I've gone through in my life. This person doesn't know that, you know, not all of us get to live in ignorance, that is a privilege. And some of us have known that we were different from the beginning. And these were things that were coming out of her mouth, and it felt very grounding in this work, because this is, as Annie said, it's my first year in a 6th grade classroom. So I've taught 3 years at an alternative high school. And so having that experience, I think, really grounded me as well, that, you know, I'm moving in the right direction, that this is something that can work not only at a social justice alternative school. So I have a few more slides left, and many of these are just going to be filled with pictures. Throughout the presentation, I've ingrained answers to the 3 questions, not necessarily only on the slides that, you know, you see the question appear, but really throughout the talk as well. And so how to build a mathematics of empathy. It really stems from recreating student roles in the classrooms and seeing them as multidimensional, seeing them as learners, as living beings, as community members, as global citizens, mathematicians, leaders, coaches, agents of change, curriculum influences, teachers, scholars, and much more. And not only seeing them this way, but using this vocabulary with the students so that they also feel that these are things that they are. And they begin to call each other scholars, or they begin to call each other teachers, or they begin to call each other community members or learners. I also use the term lifelong learners with them. So making that a part of just the classroom culture, the environment, sets that platform up for empathy, that, you know, when someone is up there being teacher and they're presenting in front of the whole class their work, we need to have empathy. We're not just talking over them, or we're not doing something to the side, you know, we're giving them our full attention, so that when we're up there giving teachers or being teacher, we also have thrown that energy into the universe, and it's going to come back to us. You know, and we're practicing being in community together. And I have said this multiple times during the presentation, but I can't say it enough. It's really about knowing your students, knowing their struggles and their strengths as living beings. You know, as a teacher, I found most of my success comes in connecting with my students and building a learning community with them. This is a picture that was taken outside of Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy with staff and students. On the last days, you know, a lot of them didn't want to leave on that last day. They wanted to stay. They wanted to go stay at the school. We had a barbecue that last day, so they wanted to hang out and just talk to us. And it just showed that community, that they continue to reach out even after they don't have to anymore. And something that helped me ask more questions when I wasn't sure which questions to ask to my students was something called funds of knowledge. So if you're not sure on which types of questions to ask, funds of knowledge can be a great resource as like a first step into that. I also do community builders throughout the entire year. I try to at least do it twice a month. If I'm having a big behavior issue in the classroom, where there's a lot of resistance to unlearning just behavior that has been disruptive, but maybe was encouraged in other environments, because, you know, students were kicked out of the classroom and that's what they wanted. And so to them, that was a reward that they got kicked out of the classroom. And so the behavior continued. I will do more community builders with them and build in more intentional conversations on growth and empathy, and use that as a foundation. So the last part of my presentation here, I would like to just give voice to the students who I have worked with over time and show pictures of the things that we have done and the projects that have been created within my classroom. And so it was never something that just came out of me. It has always been something that has been created together with students, with their voices, with their experiences, with the things that they want to reclaim power in and then transform. And so on the top left, you see a beautification project that was done at Sullivan High School in Rogers Park, where a young girl made this poster of Angela Davis and wrote a quote on it. In the middle here, we did an interdisciplinary unit with a math and history curriculum, where the organization Fight for 15 also came into our classrooms and did a teach-in. And we collaborated with undocumented students who were part of the citizenship department at Instituto. On the right here, we went on an El Bejo community tour. For those of us that don't know, that's Little Village Environmental Justice Organization. And the students went on a community tour that showcased the work in their community that this organization had done to close down 2 coal plants that were in Little Village. Below here, you see the teach-ins that were preparing students to go on these community tours. And so my math class played a key role. They were learning about racism, classism, and sexism within math, and they went into an English classroom and did teach-ins to educate other students on these issues for 2 days. Here in the middle, you see an infographics project that we did on the school to prison pipeline. To the left is a protest that a group of students and a few teachers went to protesting police brutality, because a lot of our students had come in and out of the juvenile justice system, in and out of Cook County, had experienced a lot of police violence and abuse. Family members have been killed and brutalized by the police officers of these young people as well. And for those of you that don't know, Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy is less than a mile away from Cook County Jail. And so a lot of the work that I've done with them is in abolitionist work and abolishing the prison system and imagining a world where what do we do when harm is inflicted. On the top left are nonviolent direct action trainings that I took students to during the reparations campaign that happened in Chicago. Here's a vigil that we all attended when the 43 students went missing in Mexico. This is a scaling project that was an interdisciplinary curriculum idea with the art teacher on speciesism. So we looked at what are the roles of animals in our society. And then below was an interdisciplinary unit that we did with English, history, art, and science. And then we also included the technology education coordinator to hit on the prison industrial complex, speciesism, and then how do you decolonize yourself in the world that we are living in today. In the middle is an altar for students who died during the school year. Last year, there were 4 deaths at Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy. It was a very tough time, and the violence hit very close to home. This was something that wasn't necessarily, it wasn't necessarily something that was planned out, but something that more manifested by the students and them experiencing our culture, and really it manifested on its own. And then to the left, you see a light projection that was done by students in collaboration with the Chicago Light Brigade during the National Week of Action Against School Pushouts. And so I think my time is almost up. I have a timer running in the background. So I just want to show a quick video that my students worked on in my classroom and put together on a mathematics of empathy on the school to prison pipeline. And so for those of you who don't know what the school to prison pipeline is, I would strongly encourage you to do more research in this area and really inform yourself on how, as an educator, this is a critical topic to be informed in if we are working towards dismantling hate in our schools and building tolerance and really creating another world where all students are valued, and particularly marginalized youth. Okay, so we were testing the sound before, so I'm going to play a little bit and I'm just going to ask if you can hear it. Could we hear anything?
It was very faint. I don't think we could quite hear
No,
that.
I don't think we can hear it.
Okay, let me try one more thing.
That I already had, so they just dropped me as soon as I went back after like the 5th month of missing school.
Is that better?
I got searched because they had the smell of marijuana in the classroom.
I got suspended for 3 weeks, regardless if I had nothing on me or anything. Like, they didn't find anything on me, and they were trying to arrest me. When I had gotten to school that morning, I told this one girl that I had marijuana. When it was time to go to the classroom, I started showing it off. My mom, when she got there, they already had the handcuffs on me. They grabbed me really hard. When I was arrested, I was only 12 years old. If I was the teacher or the principal, I probably would have, put the student on the side, spoke to them, tell them what's right from wrong, not just have a student arrested at a young age.
Students that I've worked with are young people who have gone through experiences in the school to prison pipeline, whether that has been being suspended repeatedly, being expelled, being dropped because of their attendance, being arrested, thus being expelled. They come from a history of this system really just doing what it wants with their lives.
My old high school, it was in a rival gangs territory, so I would have to cross, into different gangs territory every day just to get to school. I was around 14 to 15. They took 2 gangs that were causing a lot of trouble inside the school, and they locked them in a room for about a month, for the entire day. We felt like we were criminals. We're not allowed to socialize with anybody else. We have to stay isolated. That this is where they're going to end up later on in life, so they used to be locked in the room all day. It felt like they were preparing us for our futures.
I chose this project because I felt that it was necessary for students to imagine math in a different lens that they have been used to seeing math. We never see the pictures or the images or the stories that humanize math, that tell a story with these numbers. These statistics that we see are not just a number that ends there, but each statistic has a story. And so I wanted to challenge them and I need to imagine math in an image, in an infographic, to send this powerful message. Great, you see an infographic and you see this image in front of you, and that image is intended to engage your audience. It makes them walk up to your infographic. What image are you going to use that's going to lure in a person to read the story that you want to tell?
1 out of every 20 white students got suspended. 1 out of every 14 Latino students got suspended. 1 out of 13 Native American got suspended, and 1 out of every 6 Black students have gotten suspended.
Our system relies on students having low math skills. It relies on our students disengaging with math at the age of 7 or at the age of 8. And that, to me, as I've seen it, is the foundation for their own internalized oppression. They begin to believe that they are stupid. They begin to believe that they are worthless, that they cannot do something.
I had a teacher who would always put me down in front of all the class. He would just, make fun of me, mock me. I believed everything that he told me. So I stopped coming to school. I just wanted somebody to tell me, like, are you okay? What's going on? Why don't you come to class, to school? But nobody ever did.
Everyone has a different reaction to being told what to do. Some of them come in and they're really aggressive and they don't want to hear another adult tell them, this is what you have to do. Some of them are so used to being quiet that it even shows in their writing. They write so small and then they erase it, or write so faint that you can't even see their writing, that they don't want you to know what they're thinking or what they're going through. Some of them, it takes them a while to speak before they'll actually speak to you and open up with you. But I have found that when I open my class with a circle as the semester starts, and we hear a story from each of us, that it helps us humanize each other. We want students to know that they matter and they're valuable, and the dedication that they show by continuing to push through their education is amazing for what a lot of these young people have gone through, for the trauma that they have experienced in their lives. In Lakesh, tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other me. Si te hago daño a ti, if I do harm to you,
me hago daño a mí mismo.
I do harm to myself.
Si te amo y respeto,
if I love and respect you,
Me amo y me respeto yo.
I love and respect myself.
And I believe that that is the end of our time together. So thank you.
We actually do have some questions. Would you,
Okay.
is it okay to do a couple?
Yeah,
Because I think we, of course, we have like 15 minutes. We could do some questions.
Well, the end
Okay.
of my time speaking. Yeah.
So let's see. One question that a few people were asking was just kind of that idea of balance, of how much time it takes to get to know your students versus covering the curriculum. Like, kind of how do you find that balance? And somebody even said perhaps that's what this whole talk was sort of about. But how do we kind of let go of that pressure to just cover the math?
So you're saying that the question was about balance, and someone brought up praxis, like the praxis cycle, Paulo Freire.
Well, just, I mean, how do you find that balance? You know, like we have to cover a lot of stuff. And if you also want to spend time getting to know your students, that takes time as well. So how do you find that balance, and how do you give yourself the permission, I guess, to kind of take the pressure off to just cover math and have some time to get to know your students?
So for me personally, I do use the praxis cycle. That's what I was like, if someone said praxis, that's what I engage with. So Paulo Freire, pedagogy of the oppressed, is something that is really close to my heart, and is a work that helps me in my reflection to critically analyze and to find the balance. Because the other piece of social justice math is actually the students walking out with those math skills, right? And not staying at that level wherever the trauma occurred. And I think that question really is more, so it's a complex question, right? And it depends on the individual. There's not something that I'm going to say that for sure is going to work for you. I know that for me, when I do something and when I try something, I see how much time it takes. Sometimes I do things and it bombs. Sometimes I do things and it's way better than I thought that it was going to be. And it actually lends itself to becoming something else. And so for me, it's talking about the issues that are important to the students, stimulating their curiosity from whatever it is that they answered within that social justice survey, and then getting to know them with respect to those issues. The community builders are something that I think is also really key, because it's also not just me knowing the students, but it's them knowing each other. And maybe it's something that I just have always felt very strongly about, that is very foundational to teaching, is if the relationship's not there, the knowledge is not going to be transferred. I know for me, if I never felt a connection to my professors or my teachers, like I was like, I don't care about this class, I'm gonna figure out how you work, and then I'm gonna turn in whatever you want to see, and I'm gonna keep it moving. And that's something that I share with my students as well. And I think it just, you know, it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of reflection, like, what did I like about this? What could be different next time? And really also allowing students to take the lead sometimes, and being mindful of whatever the expectations are within your school environment. So I know that at Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy, I was given the freedom to create a curriculum. Versus where I'm at now, George Washington Middle School, a curriculum is giving to me, which is the connected math. So there's also that balance of you can't do everything. So also not everything in my class was as cool as everything that I showed.
That's real life though, right?
Yeah, it really is. Some things won't be cool, and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
It's part of real life. The students will see it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that comes to another question. You know, sometimes either parents see it this way or other teachers sometimes see it this way. Like math is one of those classes like, sorry, this math is going to hurt, but it's for your own good kind of thing. Like you're not going to like this, it's boring, but everybody has to do it. So how do we combat this with if parents feel that way or with if colleagues feel that way? Like how do you handle that?
I like to give articles to people a lot and give them homework. So I think I've just taken on the other teacher role, and it's like, oh, that's what you think, and that's where you're coming from, and this is where I'm coming from. A lot. I mean, we can hope that people would be open to listening, and definitely with the individuals who are that are willing to have those uncomfortable conversations that they often become because they have a certain mentality about math. You know, to me, it's opening up their mindset, which is a lot more difficult because adults are a lot more set in their ways versus children. You know, they take it and they run with it. They're like, oh, okay, mathematics of empathy, we'll go with it. We'll see what this is about. Versus, you know, someone else might be like, feelings don't belong in the classroom. Like, I know that some, or maybe not, feelings don't belong in a math classroom. That might be more what you hear. And I think it's, you know, it goes back to that balance of picking and choosing your battles. Obviously with parents, you have to engage. There's no really like diversion. With teachers, I mean, you got to surround yourself with people who believe in you and that are positive influences. Otherwise it gets toxic real quick. So really finding that community where people believe in you, they are with you and critically questioning and analyzing those things. And, you know, for me with parents, I've always just spoken from experiences that have happened to me that come from the heart of this is why we're doing this. Because at this age, you know, well, at the age that I'm at now with sixth graders, they're really learning a lot and also just repeating a lot of things that they've heard. So what they say isn't necessarily who they are. And I think just making parents aware of that can go a long way. I've also just transitioned into having a lot more interactions with parents. So I won't say I'm an expert in this field because a lot of my students were older than 18 before. And so the interactions were more between me and them usually, but the parents and the Latino community, I never had an issue. Everyone was supportive, everyone was down. People came to rallies with us. People came into the classroom to speak. I didn't have that issue necessarily, which I'm more or less waiting for at the school that I'm at now, but it hasn't come up yet.
Okay. I kind of wanted to revisit the part of your talk where you're talking a little bit about like cultural relevancy and versus entertainment. One question came in, and I'm going to kind of read it because I'm embarrassed I don't know all of these examples, but they said, do you ever teach algorithms from other cultures? And so they gave a couple examples: lattice multiplication, European subtraction, Japanese multiplication, Egyptian multiplication, Russian peasant multiplication, and Greenwood division algorithm. This gives me quite a list to look up later because I only know about 2 of those, but so that was the question.
Yeah, so definitely I agree with that a lot more versus just taking, right, the students' names arbitrarily or people's names and then counting the letters. I do incorporate like Aztec math or Mayan math, Nahuatl math. I've done Babylonian, I believe, and I think I know the Egyptian one and the Japanese one, but it hasn't been how do I say, necessarily like a staple. It's been something that we look at in stations, and maybe that's like a one day to see that this is also how different cultures practice math, and that's the beauty about math, that there's so many ways to get to this solution, and that it's one way isn't going to work for everyone, and that different cultures, you know, have found different paths, and it's okay.
So another person was kind of asking about that idea, again, the one that you showed with the Asian names and you were using it for data or whatever. So if you were if as a teacher, you're trying to be inclusive and you thought using names from other cultures was being inclusive, what are some red flags to look for? What are some things that let you know this isn't being inclusive, this is utilizing this for entertainment? Like what are some things as a teacher, if you're trying to make sure you're being culturally responsive, that you're being careful and you're looking for things that make it not?
That one has me thinking.
Like, was there anything when you read that, like what made your like red flags go up when you kind of saw that problem?
My partner is Chinese, and I know that Chinese, Korean, and Japanese characters, or they have like different characters in their language. And I'm also familiar with different Asian cultures in the sense that I've had a lot of people that are close to me associated with different cultures. A lot of that I think comes from the conversations that I'm very fortunate to have in my inner circles of people. You know, if I ever think that something is questionable, I would always ask someone that you trust, that maybe identifies with the culture that's being brought up. You know, in that case, it was Korean, Chinese, and Japanese. And like I saw it and I got mad right away. Like I was just like, this is wrong. This is terrible. How can we do this? And like, this is okay. This is something published that it says we have to do this. And so like I ask people, because sometimes like I pick and choose your battles, right? You can't pick them all. But, you know, I also asked people and I was like, how do you feel about this? What if I gave you this and you were 11? You know, like, what do you think that this would be? And like, I also asked parents that I know that I'm friends with, and you know, the reaction across the board was, this is wildly inappropriate, and how are we teaching children these things? To everyone that I asked. So when in doubt, if you have no one else to ask, my email is on the screen. You can send me an email and you can ask me and I'll tell you the truth. Well,
Nice.
How I see the truth to be.
Yeah. A lot of the ideas that you shared are very based on student interest, and kind of you took what they were concerned about or thinking about, or even just like going on in the world, and used that to develop lessons. Do you have a place to go or favorite resources or tasks that you look to for inspiration? Like, let's say I was a teacher that wanted to do this tomorrow in my classroom. Is there a place that has some things that are recommended by you that I could use so that I don't have to like reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. Can I give that link to you, Annie, and then you post it up?
Yes, definitely. I'm going to send a follow-up email with some resources from this presentation. So definitely, if you have some of those, we can share. Awesome. I think we have time for like maybe one or two more questions. Is that okay? Are you good for two more questions? Yeah. You kind of talked at the beginning about some like reflection that you even do as a teacher, like at the end of the day, like how did I do today on, you know, meeting my students' needs or whatever. So, you know, when do you do this reflection? Do you do this reflection on your own? Do you do it as part of your team? Like, do you have other educators that you work with that you have found allies in, or, you know, kind of just like your reflection process?
Yeah, so now transitioning to the school where I'm at, I'm starting to feel that silo effect that we get in teaching a lot more. And so I'm finding myself doing this reflection more on my own. So thinking about it, being really intentional about thinking about my own biases that I have, and the students that I'm naturally clicking with, and the students who I'm like, no. and being really intentional about those students that I'm just like, no, like, why am I saying no? You know, do they remind me of someone? What are they doing? Like, where did I see this behavior in my life that maybe I have a negative association with, and how do I need to heal that trauma and not project it onto this person? And really just being mindful about leaving myself notes to that, like awareness notes. Sometimes I do post-its and I'm like, you know, be aware about like your interactions with this person. Like if I had a negative interaction with someone, I need to make sure that I have at least 3 positive ones to follow up after that negative interaction. Fortunately, at Rudy Lozano Leadership Academy, you know, we were a really tight boat of radical educators where I met a really beautiful community of people that are very supportive now. And so we all got laid off at the end of the last year. A lot of my close-knit like teacher community and just also counselor community there. And we stay in touch and we talk about those issues, things that I'm seeing, you know, that story that I shared about one of my students being called a terrorist. That's definitely something that, you know, I need to be in reflection about how how are my interactions sending a clear message that like hate is not welcome here, but not also understanding that I don't want to ostracize anyone and be like, oh, well, maybe you do support Donald Trump at, like in your family, and hate is okay at your house. And, you know, maybe you have other friends who like hate's okay with, but like in this space, we need to have conversations about that. And like, we need to really unpack what that means, and we need to learn about other cultures. And so like, how do you teach students to also humanize each other in a respectful way, but also respecting everyone's boundaries? Like, those are the types of questions that I'm asking myself on a daily basis. And just, how are ways that I was mindful? How are ways that maybe I've inflicted harm today? Or what are things that I ignored? Because I know, you know, we all ignore things sometimes because we are caught up in the moment of like, now there's 20 minutes left and I have to do all these things, and oh no, and this person's trying to tell me about how they got a cat over the weekend, and that's not a question for right now, and like someone else trying to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, now it's 15 minutes. So, you know, amidst all of that, Post-its for me are just what works. I know some people write on their hands, some people have notebooks. Sometimes I do journals with students, and that helps me in my reflection, and we just pass it back and forth and write, you know, notes to each other, things that we want to share that maybe there's not time for in the class.
Great, thank you so much. I'm gonna change screens now, or I'm trying to, I don't know. Every time I do this, I act like I've never done it before. Okay, here we go. Let's see, does everyone see my screen? I don't know.
Yes.
You do? Okay. Jeez. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. There's going to be a brief after webinar survey that comes up. We would really appreciate. We do look at that feedback and help us plan for future surveys. Also, we are excited to now offer CPDU credit for our webinars. And so if you attended this webinar live, you'll get a follow-up email that will have a link to a survey you have to take that then, after filling that out, you'll get an email with your CPDU credit. So we're really excited that we're able to do that for our webinars for everyone that attended live. I also just want to mention, if you are not an ICTM member yet, we would love to have you join us. And if you go to ictm.org, you can easily find out this list of benefits are there, as well as how you can sign up. So we would love to have you. And finally, make sure that you save the date for the NCTM Regional Conference. It's coming to Chicago, so it's kind of special. It's in place of our ICTM conference this year because we are the host affiliate. So it's kind of a big deal. There'll be lots of local presenters as well as some national presenters. So you definitely want to sign up. I think you have to sign up by November 3rd to get the early bird rate. So please make sure that you are thinking about that and signing up. And we will see you next month for our next webinar. So thank you, everybody, for joining us.